Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's class, we're going to be talking about the anal canal, and if you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please do so. So straight to business. The anal canal is the terminal part of the large intestine and it is about 3 to 4 centimeter long, extending from the anorectal junction to the anal opening. So if this is the diagram of the anal canal and this is the rectum, this part is the rectum, this junction is the anorectal junction. That's the junction between the anal canal and the rectum. So if this is the rectum and the anal canal starts from here, here is the anorectal junction, right? Marking the point of transition between the both regions. So if this is the rectum, here is the anorectal junction, and here is the anal opening. So anal canal extends from the anorectal junction to the anal opening, and it is about 3 to 4 centimeter long, and also the terminal parts of the large intestine. So anatomically, the anal canal is divided into two different regions by a name called pectinate line. It is divided by the pectinate line. So it is this line that divides it into a superior part and an inferior part. Now, the upper part is the upper 2/3, while the lower part is the lower 1/3. So once again, the anal canal is divided into two different regions by a line called the pectinate line. It divides into the upper 2/3 and the lower 1/3. So let's talk about the features of these different parts respectively. So the upper 2/3, which is the part superior to the pectinate line, is also known as the visceral part. It is also known as the visceral part, and it is derived from the hindguts, which is the endoderm. Then it also has autonomic innervation, and it is less sensitive to pain, and it is supplied by the superior rectal artery. So once again, the upper part is also known as the visceral part. It is derived from the hindguts. It has autonomic innervation, less sensitive to pain, and supplied by the superior rectal artery. So this line is the pectinate line, and this line separates it from the inferior parts. So let's talk about the lower parts. Now, the lower 1/3 is also known as the somatic part. This lower part from here to this anal opening is known as the somatic part. It is derived from the ectoderm. The innervation is somatic and is highly sensitive to pain, to touch, to temperature, and it is supplied by the inferior rectal artery. So the pectinate line divides the anal canal into the superior part and an inferior part. The superior part is the visceral part, while the lower part is the somatic part. This part is less sensitive to pain. This part is very sensitive to pain, temperature, and all that. Then here is derived from the endoderm. Here is derived from the ectoderm. The blood supply is the superior rectal artery, while the blood supply to this lower part is by the inferior rectal artery. So having discussed that, let's go to the mucosal features. The mucosal features of the anal canal. I'll be talking about this based on the landmark, which is the what? The pectinate line. So let's look at the mucosal features above the pectinate line. What are the mucosal features of the regions above the pectinate line? They are lined by columnar epithelium. They have rectal columns, also known as the column of Morgagni. It also has anal valves and also anal sinuses. So here, columnar epithelium, rectal columns, also known as the column of Morgagni. Then we have anal valves and anal sinuses. So let's talk about the features below. Having discussed the features above, let's discuss the features below the pectinate line, the mucosal features now. It is lined by stratified squamous epithelium, and it is more resistant to trauma. So having discussed that, let's go straight to discuss the sphincter mechanism. Now, the sphincter mechanism is also known as the continence control, and it can be discussed under two main subheading. Now, the first one is the internal anal sphincter, and the second one is the external anal sphincter. So once again, the sphincter mechanism is continence control, and it can be divided under two main subheading. The first sphincter is the internal anal sphincter, while the second one is the external anal sphincter. But before going to that, we need to take note of this diagram once again to understand the sphincter mechanism. Now, if you check this diagram, this is the rectum. This is the pectinate line separating the both of them, and this is the lower part, right? The part and the lower part. Well, here we have the internal anal sphincter somewhere here, which is composed of smooth muscle. Then we have the external anal sphincter here, which is skeletal muscle. So the internal anal sphincter, which is here, comprises of or is composed of smooth muscles, and it is involuntary and helps in maintaining resting tone. So the internal anal sphincter is involuntary, cannot be controlled. It's composed of smooth muscles and helps in maintaining resting tone of the anal canal, while the external anal sphincter is composed of skeletal muscle. It is voluntary. It is also supplied by the pudendal nerve, and it has three parts. This external anal sphincter has three parts. It has the subcutaneous part, the superficial part, and the deep part. So once again, we have two types of sphincter. We have the internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle, involuntary, and helps in maintaining the tone. Then we have the external anal sphincter here, composed of skeletal muscle, voluntary, that means it can be controlled by an individual, and supplied by the pudendal nerve, and has three different parts. The first part is the subcutaneous part, second part is the superficial part, and the third part is the deep part. So subcutaneous, superficial, then deep. Having discussed this, let's go straight to the blood supply to the anal canal. The blood supply that is supplied by the superior rectal artery, the middle rectal artery, and the inferior rectal artery. Now, while that is being said, let's go to the nerve supply. The nerve supply. Now, the nerve supply will be treated under two major subheadings, bearing in mind this pectinate line. So now, talking about the nerve supply above the pectinate line and the one below. So the one above the pectinate line, that is the upper two-third, right, is the autonomic innervation via the inferior hypogastric plexus, while the one below is the pudendal nerve. So the nerve supply above the pectinate line is by the inferior hypogastric plexus, while the one below that is by the pudendal nerve. So that being said, let's move to the venous drainage. The venous drainage. So it will also be treated above the pectinate line and below the pectinate line. So above the pectinate line, it drains into the portal system via the superior rectal vein to the inferior mesenteric vein, then into the portal vein. So it is from the superior rectal vein to the inferior mesenteric vein to the portal vein. Now, below the pectinate line, it drains into the systemic venous system via the inferior rectal veins into the internal pudendal vein, into the internal iliac vein. So having discussed that, let's go to the lymphatic drainage of the anal canal. Just like you've treated for blood supply, the venous drainage, and also for the nerve supply, the lymphatic drainage of the anal canal will be treated above the pectinate line and below the pectinate line. So that means this pectinate line is the line that divides it into an upper part and a lower part. So let's go to the lymphatic drainage. Above the pectinate line is by the internal iliac node, and below the pectinate line is by the superficial inguinal node. So once again, above the pectinate line is by the internal iliac node, and below it is by the superficial inguinal node. So having said that, let's go to the clinical significance. Now, one major clinical significance of the anal canal is hemorrhoids, and hemorrhoids are often called piles, and they are swollen and enlarged veins in or around the anus and the lower rectum. So hemorrhoids they are also called piles, and they are swollen and also enlarged veins in or around the anus and the lower rectum. So we have two types. We have what we call the internal hemorrhoids, and we have what we call the external hemorrhoids. The internal hemorrhoids, they are located above the pectinate line, and they are usually painless. So the internal hemorrhoids are located at the upper two-third, right? And they are usually painless. While the external hemorrhoids, they are located below the pectinate line, and they are usually painful because of the somatic innervation. Recall that the upper two-third is autonomic, while the lower one third is somatic. So internal hemorrhoids, they are located above the perinate line, usually painless, while the external hemorrhoids, they are located below the perinate line, are usually painful due to the somatic innervation. I hope that with this you understand the anatomy of the anal canal. So please, if you are subscribed to this channel, please do so. And if you have any questions, let me know. See you next class. Thank you.